For maths, we're looking at classifying time in terms of both a 12-hour format and a 24-hour format. And then we're going to understand and apply how we move between them. We're going to start with 12-hour. So it's important we think about our known facts. So there's 24 hours in a day. So therefore there's 12 hours in half a day. And half a day is broken down into AM in the morning and PM in the afternoon. So we have 12 hours at the front of the day and 12 hours at the back of the day, and somewhere in the middle is midday. And this is going to help us decide where the time is, whether it's really early in the morning or really late at night, or maybe it's close to the middle. But depending on these will impact on our 24-hour time, because if it's AM, it still has to represent that time. If you have your breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to be representing it as 8 o'clock at night, because that'll be a very late time to have breakfast. So what we're going to think about first of all is our 12-hour and our 24-hour. So if we have a situation where it's early in the morning, well, it's only the first 12 hours of the day, so 12 hours haven't passed yet. So we don't actually need to add anything on, because with the 24-hour time, we're accounting for 12 hours that have already passed. So we might actually attempt this question first in that sense. So it's 8 PM, so it's in the afternoon. So 12 hours have already passed, and then we've had another 8. So then we need to work out how many hours there are altogether, and that just gives us 20. Now the minutes are going to stay the same, and we don't need to write AM or PM, because in 24-hour time, if it's 8 PM, it's represented by that 20, because 12 hours had already passed, and then we had an extra 8. And that 8 will change depending on how many hours you've got, as long as it's PM. However, when it's AM, we're not going to add on the 12, because of course those 12 haven't occurred yet. We've only had 8 out of the 12. So we've still only had 8 hours. We've got no minutes. But in 24-hour time, in that format, we have to have 2 digits at the back and 2 digits at the front. So because no extra time has happened, we're just going to put a 0. Now this isn't always the case, and there's a few exceptions to the rule, but the general thing you can think about is if it's PM, you can add on 12 hours. So I hope that makes sense. And with AM, we can think about adding a 0. But again, there's sometimes exceptions to the rule. If there's already a digit in that place, it might be a 1. We don't need to add anything to it, so it would still stay a 1. So if we had 10, 11, then it would stay the same. So if we're going back the other way, however, if we've got 24-hour time, well then we need to kind of use this in reverse. So we need to think about how many hours have passed since the start of the day. So remember, this is the start over here. You have 12 hours for the first half of the day, another 12 hours, and it's the end of the day, 24 hours in total. So because we've only had 7 since the beginning, we can correctly assume then it's 7 in the morning, so it'd be 7 AM. Because remember, the AM comes first, then the PM. Now here, we've got 19. So we can assume again, we've already had 12. We've then had some additional hours. So the maths we might want to do here is, well, we've got 19. We've already had that 12, so I want to know how many's left. So I could, if I wanted to, do a written subtraction, or I could do some mental maths. Either way, we're left with 7. But it's not going to be 7 AM, because that number's greater than 12. We know it's PM. So it's all about understanding the role and the importance of these zeros if the number's bigger than 12, and if it has AM or PM. So I'll just recap quickly. So if it's got AM, then we're essentially going to add a 0, unless if there's already a digit of value there, then it stays the same. And it might look like you've got 10 o'clock over here, 10 AM, and you've just written 10 again, but that's fine, because if it was PM, it would be an additional 12 onto that, it'd be 22. So you could always double check and think, well, is it different? If it's PM, you're going to add 12 hours on, because it's already had the 12. We already had all the hours for the AM, and we've had an additional 8. So we think about PM, we add 12 hours. For the inverse, we can think about this kind of backwards. If it's got a 0 or it's less than 12, then we can correctly assume that it's AM. It's going to be PM if the number is more than 12. Now you'll notice on my answers I didn't have any minutes and I didn't have any on my questions either. That's fine. I haven't put any on because we don't need to practice using them because they stay exactly the same. So if there was a 5 and a 2 there, you would replicate and keep a 5 and a 2. We're only changing the format of the hours, hence 12 hour and 24 hour. So the minutes should always stay the same. So with that said, I'd like you to pause the video, and if it starts as 12 hour, turn it into 24. If it starts as 24, turn it into 12. We'll go through some answers in a minute. Okay, hopefully you had enough time to go through those, so I'm just going to put my equal signs in because it's still important to show they're equivalent. It's representing the same amount of time. So, again, here's one of those scenarios that was a little exception from the rule. It's AM, so we need to add a 0, but actually there's a 1 there. You can still apply that logic. If I was going to add a 0, 1 add 0, still 1. So the 1 remains, so it's still 10:32, and that represents just gone 10:30, so it's just past 10:30 in the morning because it's AM. PM, so we need to add the 12 because the morning's already happened, so it's 12 add 4, which is 16, and then again those minutes stay the same, and hopefully you didn't put PM there or AM there because we don't need them. Here we've got a 12-hour time we need to turn back. So the number there is greater than 12, so I need to subtract 12 off it because I need to know, well, actually, AM and PM time, the greatest number you can have in your hours is 12, so I need to get rid of that, so I'll work out what I've got. So I need to do 23 take away 12, which gives us 11:40, but we're not done there. So don't make that typical mistake of going, okay, I've transferred it across, because we need to show that's PM. Because you could put AM there and get it totally wrong, even though technically you've done the right maths. And the challenge, this was a nasty question. Now I'll be interested to see what your answer was, or whether you had to do some further research, because in fact we could have had 24:00 or 00:00, because essentially this is either super early in the morning or super late at night, and that's all those times would mean. So that would be really, really late at night, right at the end of the day, and that's right at the start of the day. Now these times occupy the same space, so this would only really be used if you're kind of deferring and explaining, well, that's the end of a particular day. But either of those are acceptable answers, so well done if you got any of those or if you researched it yourself. So what I'd like you to do is have a go at creating some of your own times. Start with AM, start with PM, then start with some 24-hour, and just have a practice moving between the two. So 12 to 24 and 24 to 12.